The sun was setting over the quiet suburban street, casting long shadows across the pavement. Officer Daniels leaned against his patrol car, scanning the area with a tired, judgmental gaze. To him, it was just another routine shift, another day filled with minor disturbances and pointless calls. But tonight would not be like the others. Tonight, one decision, one careless assumption would unravel everything he thought he knew about power, authority, and consequence. And it would all begin with a single man walking calmly down the sidewalk, minding his own business. The man wore a simple hoodie, jeans, and carried himself with quiet confidence. There was nothing outwardly remarkable about him, yet something about his composure made him stand out. Daniels narrowed his eyes, suspicion already forming without reason. Years of unchecked bias had trained his instincts to see threat where there was none. As the man approached, Daniels stepped forward, blocking his path. "Hey you," he barked. The man stopped, meeting his gaze calmly. That calmness irritated Daniels more than anything else. "Where do you think you're going?" Daniels demanded, his tone sharp and unnecessary. The man glanced around briefly, then back at the officer. "Home," he replied evenly. No fear, no hesitation. Daniels didn't like that. In his mind, compliance meant nervousness, submission, apology, even when none was required. But this man offered none of that. Instead, he stood there, grounded, unshaken. And in that moment, Daniels made a decision, not based on evidence, but on ego. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Daniels said, stepping closer. The man raised an eyebrow. "Is there a reason?" he asked calmly. The question hit Daniels like a challenge. It wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't submissive either, and that was enough. "Don't question me," Daniels snapped. "Just do what you're told." The man sighed softly, as if he had been here before. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, not in fear, but in measured compliance. Daniels watched every movement with exaggerated caution, his hand hovering near his holster. The tension in the air thickened, though the man showed no signs of aggression. He handed over his ID without a word. Daniels snatched it, scanning the name briefly. Something about it didn't register, because Daniels wasn't really looking. He had already decided who this man was in his mind, and that decision would soon prove to be the biggest mistake of his life. "Stay right there," Daniels ordered, walking back to his patrol car. He radioed in the ID, tapping his fingers impatiently on the dashboard. The man stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes forward. No resistance, no attitude, just presence. But to Daniels, that calmness still felt like defiance. He didn't notice how wrong he was. Not yet. The radio crackled to life, and everything changed in an instant. "Unit 47, confirm the name again?" the dispatcher asked, her tone suddenly cautious. Daniels frowned. "Why?" he snapped. There was a pause. Then, "Sir, that individual is flagged. You need to proceed carefully." Daniels smirked, misinterpreting the warning. "Yeah, I figured," he said under his breath. In his mind, flagged meant trouble, criminal, threat. But the dispatcher's next words froze his blood. "Sir, that individual is a federal oversight officer, Internal Affairs Division. You are advised to disengage immediately." Daniels blinked. "What?" he muttered. He looked up from the radio, eyes slowly drifting back to the man standing calmly under the streetlight. The same man he had just disrespected, the same man he had assumed was nothing. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted, and Daniels felt it instantly. His heartbeat quickened as reality began to settle in. The man hadn't moved, he hadn't reacted. He had simply waited, watching, observing, documenting. Daniel swallowed hard, stepping out of the car with less confidence than before. The authority in his posture began to crumble, replaced by uncertainty. For the first time that night, Daniels wasn't in control. The man looked at him as he approached, expression unchanged. "Everything all right, officer?" he asked quietly. Daniels hesitated, unsure of what to say. The words he had spoken minutes earlier now echoed in his mind, harsh, unjustified, unnecessary, and now they carried consequences, real ones. the kind that didn't disappear at the end of a shift. Daniels cleared his throat, trying to regain some composure. "Just routine check," he muttered, though his voice lacked its earlier authority. The man studied him for a moment, as if measuring not just his words, but his intent. "Routine," he repeated softly. "Interesting how routine tends to look different depending on who you stop." Daniels shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of that statement settle in his chest like a stone. The man stepped forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to change the energy between them. "Do you always stop people without cause?" he asked. There was no anger in his tone, only calm precision. That made it worse. Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I was just doing my job," Daniels finally said, though even he knew how hollow it sounded. The man nodded slowly. "Your job," he echoed. "And what exactly do you believe that job is?" Daniels felt cornered, not physically, but mentally. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier, like it carried more responsibility than he had ever acknowledged. Silence stretched between them. The street, once quiet and uneventful, now felt like a stage where every action mattered. Daniels glanced around, half expecting someone to step in and relieve him of this moment. But no one came. This was his situation, his decision, his consequence. The man reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small leather wallet, flipping it open. Inside was a federal badge, gleaming under the streetlight. Daniel's stomach dropped. It wasn't just any badge. It represented oversight, accountability, consequences at a level Daniels had never personally faced before. "I didn't want to do this tonight," the man said quietly. "But sometimes situations present themselves." Daniels stared at the badge, then at the man. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Just minutes ago, Daniels held authority. Now he was the one being evaluated. "Do you understand what just happened here?" the man asked. Daniels nodded slowly, though the full weight of it hadn't even hit him yet. "You stopped me without cause," the man continued. "You escalated without reason, and you assumed before you assessed." Each word landed with surgical precision. Daniels ran a hand through his hair, frustration mixing with panic. "Look, I didn't mean—" he started, but the man raised a hand, stopping him. "Intent doesn't erase impact," he said firmly. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Daniels had relied on that excuse for years. The man stepped back slightly, giving Daniels space, but not relief. "This isn't just about you," he continued. "It's about patterns, habits, systems." Daniels felt exposed, like his entire career was being quietly dissected in front of him. A car passed in the distance, headlights briefly illuminating the scene. For a moment, Daniels saw himself reflected in the window of his patrol car, uniform, badge, authority. But now, all of it felt fragile. "What happens now?" Daniels asked quietly, his earlier confidence completely gone. The man closed his badge wallet. "Now," he said, "now we document, we review, and we see how deep this goes." Daniels felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a warning, it was the beginning of something much bigger, something that could reach beyond tonight, into his past, his record, his reputation. "You've done this before," the man said, not as a question, but as a statement. Daniels didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. The man nodded slightly, as if confirming something internally. "Patterns always reveal themselves, eventually." Daniels felt his chest tighten. "Body cam," the man added. Daniels froze. Of course, everything had been recorded, every word, every tone, every decision. Daniels reached instinctively toward his chest, as if suddenly aware of the device. It had always been there, but now it felt like evidence. "You didn't think about that, did you?" the man asked calmly. Daniels shook his head slightly. No, he hadn't. Most people don't. They act first, think later, if at all. Daniels felt smaller with each passing second. The weight of consequence began to settle in fully now. Not just disciplinary action, but reputation, career, future. "I've seen careers end over less," the man said quietly. Daniels swallowed hard.